and I'm the pastor here at the Northside Seventh-day Adventist Church. I want to welcome all of you here to our education symposium put on by the Northside Community Partners, and we are just delighted that you are here today. We're going to begin our time together with a word of prayer. Would you bow your heads? Dear God, we want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be alive and to be able to come together to discuss the important subject of education. We pray, dear God, that you would bless our time together. May we learn. Let iron sharpen iron. And Father, may steps be made to make sure that every child, boy, girl, or adult has the opportunity to be all that they can be through the gift of education that you have given us. We pray in your precious name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Barnes. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Angela Wade. I am the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships Development and Marketing for Magdala House. I am also a community partner. Today is a very special day because it's our first annual Northside Education Symposium. So we're so grateful for you today that you have chosen to come. It's a rainy day, it's a Friday, you could have been anywhere. So this really speaks to your understanding of the transformative power of education. We have some guests, I think, who might be here today. Is Councilwoman Webb here? What about Mr. Frank Bell? Okay, he's on his way. Well, we'll acknowledge our special guests later. We also have, you'll see 3 tables in the front. We have the St. Louis County Library, the EOC, and the Missouri Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development. They will be providing resources to everyone this morning. So thank you for your commitment to our resource table and providing us with the tools we need to thrive, both personally, professionally, and academically. I'd also like to introduce our moderators for today's discussion. Ms. Marlena Hairston, Compliance Manager at the Higher Education Consortium. Say hi, wave. All right. And then we have Ms. Missy Melissa Bowles, St. Louis Area Community Liaison at Southeast Behavioral Hospital. Okay. Both are members of our community partners team as well, and they'll be guiding you through this important discussion today. Now, before we dive into any deeper questions and start to talk to our panelists today, what I'd like for you to do is to just take a moment to think. Think about why you're here today. What brought you here? Why was it important enough for you, again, to take a Friday on a rainy day when you could have been anywhere else? Why was it important for you today to come here? Just take a moment and think about that. As you're thinking, I'm going to ask our panelists, starting from Professor Butcher. I knew your name, but I just, we're going to ask Professor Butcher to start, and he's going to tell us who he is, where he's from, and then why was it important for you to be here today. And we'll go down to each of the panelists. Again, introducing yourself, telling us where you're from, and then why was it important for you to take this time today to be here.
Guess I'll stand up, just for the first time though. So again, Michael Beecher, I'm from St. Louis, still live in St. Louis most of my life. I'm a professional engineer, whole bunch of initials back there, PE, DWRE, EWRI, So I think I do value education and being from St. Louis. Want to see St. Louis thrive, and so I think events like this, with the different resources, that put a value on education, so every child can be all that they can be. Was an important. So if I can have some small part in that. I saw the O for billboard on I-70 driving up from Webster. So O for she everywhere, right? But, so be a force for good was what the billboard said. Thank you.
Guess I'll stand since we've started that. Hi there, my name is Nicole Brown. I am the branch manager for Lewis and Clark Library, and it was important for me to be here because I have been at many different levels of education, from being a teacher myself, 4th grade, terrible, to being an advocate for foster kids with getting their education and also handling disciplinary hearings for them, to working in community-based organizations and being a counselor for high school kids. So kind of been all over the place, and then that led me to Lewis and Clark. I'm not from here originally. I'm from Huntsville, Alabama. So moving here to St. Louis, I had to learn a lot about the education system and how different it is from growing up in the South. Just the segregation of everything, how rules change, how often kids are suspended, how often they're imprisoned, how often moving into foster care really changes their educational support. And so now, being in a library, I am able to work more on the resource side of things for families. And so it was important for me to be able to, I guess, be a part of that discussion, just coming from a place of knowing what it's like to be a teacher, knowing what it's like to be a parent, but then also knowing what it's like to deal with resources that are underfunded.
Stand as well. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rita Hurd-Days. I am currently chair of the St. Louis County Council. What brought me here today is that this is just about my church. They asked me to come, they asked me to participate, and when they asked me to do that, I do that. However, education has been an integral part of my life, starting with my parents. I too am not from here. I am from the state of Louisiana, and here by college and marriage. I went to Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri, and from there I have moved to St. Louis. And so I've been here for over so many years, and and so now this is home. And but I've noticed that in the way the St. Louis area is, I guess, partitioned off in terms of education, in terms of economics, where you live, and decides and depends on the kind of education that you get. We know, and from the South, education was the great equalizer. And so if you, I don't care if you were moderate income to low income, you wanted your children to go to school. You wanted your children to have a good education, because that catapulted you above most of your parents. And so that was very important. I've carried that through in my 3 children. They've all been educated in the public education system. And because of that, that was a responsibility of mine to make sure that what didn't happen there happened at home. And so carrying that through now to grandchildren, it's become very important. But I do see the disenfranchisement, if you will, or the devaluing of education in our system. And that's something that we really have to grab our hands around that and make sure that doesn't happen, particularly for our children. So thank you for having me.
So, for those who just came in, my name is Pastor Trevor Barnes Jr. And besides being the pastor, the reason why I'm here is because I know that I am a product of the education that I have received. I know that there are people who have poured into me along my journey and have helped to shape me into the person that I am. I also know the value of education when I compare my journey to others who have not had the same opportunities that I have had. And I'm also here because I'm a parent. I'm not from St. Louis, as the previous two panelists have said. I grew up in California, and I was in California before I came here. And one of the issues that my wife and I wrestled with prior to coming here is, should we come based upon the possible education outlook for our children? And we decided that we would not run from the problem, but we would run to the problem. And so for me, this is important that we have these conversations and we do something to change the educational outlook for St. Louis and St. Louis County.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to follow the lead of the pastor and stay seated. My name is Donnie Harris, and I serve as the director of the Educational Talent Search Trio program for the Higher Education Consortium. And I have been in education over 44 years when I was sitting here thinking about that. And also, I also remember being a little girl and in the basement having the classroom set up so my friends could come over, and I was always the instructor. And I had the blackboard, I had the pencil sharpener and everything set up in the basement. And I think I knew then that education was my calling. It was something that was going to be a part of me. I think education is very crucial. We're living in a time that we need to really be more proactive about it. I was in St. Louis Public Schools, graduated from Beaumont High School, went to the HBCU here, Harris Stowe, and then my graduate degrees were basically local here in St. Louis, Missouri. So I wasn't born in St. Louis, but I've been here since I was 2, so I am a St. Louisian. And being involved in the St. Louis Public Schools, working with the St. Louis Public Schools for 34 years, I felt a need to be a part of the positive change, and I still feel that. We need to do what's necessary to make sure that our children, and especially, like I said, disenfranchised, marginalized students, get access to education and to post-secondary education. So I'm here because Marlena asked me. And I thought, wow, what an opportunity to be a part of this great panel and be in front of you just to talk about some things that we can come together on, collaborate. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Cassandra Pinkston, CEO of Higher Education Consortium, and I am here, or at least in the field of education. I think it's something that was my parents' will to me. Both my parents were educators. My mom, early childhood education, and my father in high schools, University City High School to be exact. So education has always been a part of my life. My father always wanted me to be a teacher, which I did not want to be a teacher, but I always seemed to find myself back in some education arena. I worked in early childhood education for years. I was a substitute teacher, and even in high school, I was the first student on a school board in the state of Missouri, and from my recollection, probably the first in the country to ever have a student on the school board. That was a while back. So it's always been instilled in me to always be around education, understand why it's important, be an advocate for myself and others. So when I found myself in this opportunity with Higher Education Consortium, it was just the right path for me. It was something that I've always aspired to be a part of a nonprofit organization, be a leader in this organization, and when the opportunity with education came about, it was like a no-brainer. So I'm in the area of education for all those reasons, and I'm here today because, again, our programs and services reach out to students in middle school, through high school, and even support those that are in college. So it's important that we are here, that we are represented in this community as well. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Danielle Bowles Martin. I am proudly from North City, St. Louis. Proudly born and raised, not too far from here, actually. I currently work as a process engineer, but I'm also the president of the St. Louis Gateway chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers here. Why am I here? Well, one, I would never miss an opportunity to be able to be a part of what has shaped me to even get where I am. When I talk about becoming an engineer, a lot of what Pastor Barnes has said related to not only the importance of education, but also the importance of community. I'm a product of both the community and the village that surrounded me and the environments that I was in, and also the education that I was able to get because of that push and the opportunities and resources that were brought to me from the village and community I was part of. I recognize that now, as someone who has what I couldn't even have foreseen as a child to be this life, I now recognize the necessity to be visible for people who, one, are in environments similar to mine when I was a child. When you're a child and you're worried about wanting to go play, but really you're kind of also hungry, you're speaking to you all the time, or speaking to you and downgrading everything that you do simply because of the environment that you had no choice in. That when I think about the journey that it takes to get here, I recognize that it's important to be in the room of people who have also committed themselves to that. That's why I'm here this morning. I thank you to everyone and to those who have established this. Thank you to the people who are serving as great guidance for me as I'm in my leadership, as well as being able to learn from the people who are going to be here today. That's why I'm here.
Great, thank you. Thank you, panelists. We are, again, very grateful for you coming today and willing to share your time and your insight and really willing to engage. And again, they told us the reasons why they're here. You thought about the reasons why you're here. That is the point at where we want to engage today. That is each of our stakes in education. Again, I heard Councilwoman Webb say, it's the great equalizer that can catapult you in life. That kind of sums up everything. It's more than just a classroom. It's a pathway. It's a system that can either close gaps or open gaps. It can uplift generations or hold them back. That is why we're here today. So before we start, I think Mr. Bell walked in. Surprise, surprise. We want to thank you for coming. He's one of our special guests, and he's the CEO of Elevate St. Louis. Thank you, Mr. Bell. So before we start, again, just hold on to those thoughts, and that's where we want to engage. I am going to turn it over now to Marlena and Missy to get started.
So that's a huge question, and knowing that that was going to be the first one, it very much stressed me out, but I'm going to go with it. So we know education is foundational, right? And it really thrives when it's accessible and relevant and continues to grow and change based on the students that you're serving. Not just trying to teach to the whole, but also teaching to the individual students' needs. However, that is very hard to do when our teachers don't have enough support in the classroom. One teacher to 30 students is never going to be able to reach each one of those kids, right? So you're talking about many levels of government that we have to engage with. And so in this way, we have to have civic engagement, because if we're not talking to our representatives about how funding goes and also how professional development is provided, there isn't really going to be much change. From a public library standpoint, we have as an organization said that we are committed to lifelong learning and technology and community-based support, because we believe that the community also asks for what they need, and we can do that through community organizations as well. Schools don't need to do it alone. We're partners in that. And so we try to have things that are available for them, such as our kits and all of that. And of course, we'll get into resources later, but we're trying to also be a part of filling that gap. And so by supporting those community-based organizations, those social services, and also schools at the same time, and remembering that we're partners in this, I think we can continue to keep it at the forefront of what we're trying to do to maintain our society. But that also feels like a much bigger question than me. But yeah.
Yeah, I want to agree. I think this is a huge question. And the angle that I'll take the question from is from my area of expertise, which is the venue of faith and values. And the reason for that is because I don't want us to look at this question and assume that education is just in a classroom. But education actually begins in the home. And so there are certain things that I think are needed in terms of a parent raising a child, or the society raising a child, even the church raising a child, things that are needed like resilience. Because whatever you go on your educational journey and life's journey, there are going to be challenges that are inevitable. And I think that the obstacles can be overcome with the values and the morals that are put into people that help them over the long term of their journey. And so I think that that is critical to the overall formation of who people become, so that society is bettered by the type of people that we are building. Because I think that character formation and education are one and the same. You know, education molds you and shapes you to become who you are.
Thank you. I have to chuckle a little bit whenever I hear this first generation college. I was actually first generation high school, so neither of my parents had anything that approached any real formal education. Yet they were probably some of the brightest people I knew. I mean, real craftspeople. My mother made my sister's wedding dress. How many people could do that? Right? My father, a 7-year apprenticeship to be a printer. So I grew up in a house where learning was valued and being able to contribute. But I have a real distinct memory, a note I made, and I going down to Rolla, Missouri S&T now, right? Going down to Rolla, and I'd had some credits from community college and stuff and getting that transferred. So a lot of family down in the hills there, and so Dad went with me, and we're sitting in the registrar's office, and I go through, I got this class, how's that transfer? We're walking out, and my father, again, you know, not a lick of formal schooling to speak of, we're walking out. He's, boy, what's a major? Boy, what's a prerequisite? I had no idea what any of that was. So just some of that coaching, and it's so important now because of the debt, right? Because if you make a mistake in planning out your schedule now and you end up in an extra semester of school, yeah, that's a lot of debt, right? So I think just kind of managing my education to get done without a whole bunch of debt or other issues. And again, luckily my parents were smart in all the ways that mattered. But just, if you don't have that, somebody in your life that's been to college, it can be hard to be the first to go. And hard, I think psychologically, but also just hard specifically about what do I do to get, how do I fill out my FAVASA? How do I do all that? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I want to say that for the most part, adults talk about education the way it was for them. That's not necessarily the case anymore. There are challenges that these children face that we did not have to go through those kinds of things. And so it's important in my mind to have children at the table while these decisions are being made. And even to the lunches, all of those kinds of decisions that you're making for them, without them. And sometimes we miss the mark because we do not include them. But I'm an advocate. I think that a lot of, some of the school districts now are including a student council president on their boards so they can get that perspective. I know some of the colleges are now including SGA presidents as part of that experience so that they will absolutely get a firsthand idea of what it is that the students need from them versus what we knew and what happened when we were in school 100 years ago. So I think that's very important that we continue to encourage that kind of participation from our students.
I would like to ditto Councilwoman Days. Okay. Students' voices should be in every aspect of education. I agree. Every board of education, every school district should also have a junior or student board. Every school should have ambassadors, student council. I think even when they decide on changing curriculum, there should be students at the table. I attended a conference recently, and this was the thought. Everybody knows the golden rule. Do you know the golden rule? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And the platinum rule is do unto others as they would want you to do unto them. So we sometimes assume that we know exactly what they need, and we end up shoving, different curriculum, different, all kinds of things. And then we wonder, well, why aren't they doing this? Why don't they participate? So if they're in the decision making and feel a part of it, I think we'll get better results. We need to know what they need. We may not have experienced exactly what they experienced. So yes, in education, in your schools, in everything, if you don't have students, you really are kind of limiting the future of whatever that is, because you need their input to keep you updated. So yes, students should be engaged in every aspect of educational decisions in the process.
Our organization, Higher Education Consortium, was fortunate. We were founded 62 years ago by stakeholders. We had presidents of 2-year, 4-year public and private schools on our board. We had principals in private schools, principals and superintendents of public schools, corporate presidents, a union vice president, and even a state senator are all the members that founded our organization. So collaborating and identifying and working with stakeholders was just in our DNA. So some things you can do to think about how do you do that if you didn't have that opportunity the way we did is to always go out and research, look at, review reports and resources, and make contact with organizations like the United Way 211 program. Then there's also Arches, who has an impact report. So there's organizations already out there that are collaborating and working with other community groups, corporations, and schools. So looking at their list, seeing what matches and fits where you are in your organization. Also, community needs assessments. United Ways needs assessment. Your city, your county may have a consolidated plan. What are the needs of the community? That helps you identify what type of, again, stakeholders you may need to help you accomplish some of your goals effectively. And there's two things I think is important to also think about too is take time to really get to know your potential stakeholder. Understanding their mission is all important to make sure there's a good fit. And you want to build relationships that are going to lay great groundwork for collaboration. And then also when it comes to collaborating with these organizations or with these stakeholders, think about ways, again, that you can capitalize on each of your strengths so it's a win-win for both organizations. So there's already resources out there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Tap in, network, and meet people. And I think about an example, when our organization goes out to like the Urban League's back to school fair, our team, our staff are there, they're at the tables, they're working, they're talking to parents and talking to students. Well, I walked around and worked the room. I went to every table of other vendors that was there to talk about not just who they serve, but what's happening in their institution. Do they have employees that may need our help and support? Another example, we had one of our staff members out at Jennings High School at a college and career fair. Several of us were out doing some events that day. We stopped in just to see how she was doing. And again, while we were there, one of our program managers did the same thing, worked the room, went to every table and introduced herself to everybody in that room and came back with business cards. And these cards are what's going to help us extend our relationship and our services in our community. And also, there's going to be people in these events that are going to be great stakeholders for our organizations, which is going to help support us and move us forward. So take advantage of any and all opportunities that are out there, resources that are there, networking, and the key thing is making sure that there's some relationship and connection between your mission and their mission, and that it's a win-win for everyone.
Well, we noticed that from the federal level, the destabilization of the Department of Education, wanting to shift the responsibilities back to the states for education. Um, Education should not be a political pawn. But it is becoming that. It is becoming that because there's a sense of there are some who should be educated and there are some who should not be educated. And if we just want to net it out, that's basically people of color, brown people, people who are not necessarily from this particular country. And it's falling down to the states, and we know that each state, there are 50 different philosophies on education. And that creates, in my mind, a vacuum of information and, again, of resources. Here in Missouri, your schools are funded through your property taxes. Well, guess what? If you live in an affluent area, then your taxes are potentially more for your students, your per pupil expenditure for those students than it would be in a less affluent area. That's even just on the local level. And so if you take that and you morph that into your state, you morph that into your federal government, you continue to have a disparity on who gets educated, who gets the newest technology, who gets the newest and best books, and all that will be determined by economics. And in my opinion, that leaves a huge hole for people and children who look like me, because we know that there is a inherent disadvantage there. We do know that the governor of this state wanted $50 million for a choice program. Well, choice is fine. But when you make a decision as to who can go to your school and who cannot go to your school, that means many children, perhaps who look like me, will not be able to do that. That's basically the same thing that you have with other private educational institutions. If they don't take the money, then they don't have to include you in their educational opportunities. And so I think that when we get to a place where we can have across-the-board educational funding system, it will be better for all of us.
Okay. All right, so that was a long question. And I had given this a lot of thought. But so in Missouri, you're able to get some of the funding for early childhood education providers through DESE, right? However, that funding has flexed at different points in time. So you do have that option for educators. And then from the federal level, if your school qualifies as a Title I school, you're in a Title I district, you also get some additional funding from that. But now with the Department of Education, and that is, who knows, questionable, the likelihood is those Title I schools will no longer receive that kind of funding anymore unless the state can compensate for that, which currently there are House bills that would remove property tax as a funding source for those organizations. I would keep an eye on that. I think that's 908 or 903, 908, HB 908. And it would limit that funding as well. So currently hasn't passed, but it is frightening because you're like, okay, so if this is how we are able to do these sort of things, if that funding goes, what happens? It means you're going to have early childhood educators who may not have the support they need, they may not have the long-term education they need. It may also mean that it puts limits on being able to offer certain incentives for getting people who are willing to get more education to support kids into those care facilities. Okay, all of that aside, because that all feels very negative, some of the things that you can do and some of the things that we have done as an organization is we've partnered with schools that are interested in doing professional development and leveraging our resources to try to make it free. And so, say for instance, Grants View, which is one of our regional branches, and it is located in South County. We were able to get some professional development support for them that was hosted inside of our library in our meeting room, and we were able to get a presenter who was willing to offer their services for free because we were a library in partnership with that school district for them, and they were speech therapists for the schools. And so those kinds of partnerships are big, right? But also if something like HB 908 passes, then that also will limit the funding for the library. So all of these things are connected. And so when we are engaged and know what kind of bills are coming up, because if that passes, that's just out of St. Louis County Library, $11 million that will be lost. And if that $11 million is lost, it means it limits the resources that we could provide. It also means we will likely have to cut staff. So it's all connected. All those resources are connected. And so we really need to not only be engaged in what's happening to the schools, but what's potentially going to happen to the organizations that are trying to support the schools. So that all sounds really negative, but I will say that we haven't been defunded yet, and schools are still interested in providing this professional development. So we just need to keep making those connections because we are helpers and we want to be involved. We want to help each other, but we have to know who those people are first. And so as much as we can introduce ourselves, share our resources, we're going to be better off. Yes, there is. So currently, since it's still been in session, it hasn't been pulled for a subcommittee yet. The bills like that are currently just sitting in the House. And if their session ends before they review it and decide on a subcommittee, then they won't address it currently in this session. But there are many more like it. Like if you go into the House Bills Registry, there are a lot of ones around property taxes, about school funding, around community resources, not just the library, but also fire and anything like that that receives those taxes. It's a lot to read and it's a lot to go through on your own, but there are a lot of organizations that do this type of like advocacy work in general. But also just contacting your representatives and say, I heard this, can you tell me more about where your stance is on it? You know, like, have you thought about this? As a library system, we also just had our library advocacy day where we went to Jefferson City, we were talking to them about our concerns, not only how it would affect the schools, but also it would affect our ability to provide resources. So we are trying to advocate as much as possible, but libraries have a restriction on how much we can advocate in that way. We were able to do it in that format because it was meant for public libraries to come and talk to them. It was scheduled, you know, that is how they contained that. But the average person can also connect and try to get a sense of these. But the bills are complicated and they're, you know, sometimes just hard to read and convoluted. So I would say just trying to stay connected with those advocates, but also staying connected with local advocates who are interested in engaging the community.
This next question is going to. What are your thoughts about successful tools? I'm actually obviously going to be pro all of them. I would be confused if anybody didn't see value in any of that, right? But I want to take this to a slightly different approach to the question. I believe that all of those things are great. I believe, though, that when we talk about these programs, we also have to communities engaged in about being from North City and how proud I am to be from North City. It's because a lot of those programs are the things that changed the environment, what I saw every day. I laugh because as I learned so much about the panelists, I can connect to some extent to something to them. When I was in high school, I went to Huntsville, Alabama for Aviation Challenge. It was one of the first times I got to actually and openly be a dork about aviation, and nobody could judge me about it. It was great. MSD happens to be where a lot of my mentors who were in the same organization I now chair, many of them actually worked there. MSD was actually quite active in
That's gonna be hard to follow, especially the passion that came with what you said. But I totally agree that it's important that there are a variety of programs and services and opportunities for our students, as well as how we support the parents in the whole process. Our agency, we work with students from 8th grade up to adults, grandparents, great-grandparents sometime. So that whole pipeline of services that we provide include things such as, college and career planning, school readiness, high school. How do you go from middle school to high school and high school to college? We have summer program opportunities. We're in the schools with the teachers, with the parents, with the students most days. So, so all these things, what Danielle said, I'm going to just ditto what she says and not labor on anymore, but it's important that there's always a variety of opportunities and services that we can bring to our students and our parents and also the educators.
There are a lot of programs, but like you said, how are we extending these services to the students, marginalized students? Do we have transportation to get them there? Or are we going to feed them when they get there? There are a lot of things involved in this. We do offer a summer program, summer scholars, and we actually we start with 6th graders. So there's a Verizon program for our middle schoolers, and then we are on SLU's campus for almost 6 weeks for our summer program. We have students, we actually serve the city of St. Louis Public Schools, and we have actually 5 targeted high schools and 2 middle schools. So yes, anything that students can be involved in that's going to help them, that gives them an up close and personal, just to get to know the student and see what their needs are. They should be involved in these programs. I never think they're enough. We see a lot of programs, but there's never enough. But reaching out and grabbing those students, the students in the schools, the students in your neighborhood, are we actually scouting? Are we looking? Are we saying, hey, what are you doing this summer? It's very important that there are programs to reach children. And I was so glad to hear you say that you were part of that and the difference that it made in your life. And that's what I always hope. And I know we are, but you always hope that we're making a difference in the lives of these students by giving them an early experience of what your future can look like. Telling them you are great. You have greatness in you. You have this potential to do this, and then staying with them through that process. And this is often what the different programs afford the opportunity to do. So, yes.
Yeah, that's a lot in that question. And it's good that you have a spectrum of opportunities there, because the children are not cookie cutters, and there should not be a cookie cutter approach to how we do that. I'm going to go, though, to the early childhood education, where the best learning is from 0 to 3, the next best learning is from 3 to 5. That's really where we can capture the attention of the students and give them that background to say that education is important, to give them the excitement about education, excitement about reading. And we know that the 3rd grade test scores are what our prisons are based on. If you don't read by 3rd grade, then your chances of being successful decrease considerably. And I think we need to keep that in mind, because as we start with those children, as we start and they have the propensity to learn, they're like a sponge at that particular age. And I think the sponge gets smaller and smaller the older that they get. So it would be, in my mind, how our libraries reach children. And I listened to what my colleague here had to say. Libraries are not what they used to be. Libraries used to be so quiet, nobody talked, but libraries now are so interactive, and they have all these programs for all these children on different perspectives and different spectrums of what you need to do. Getting the children there is a challenge. If you are an older child and you're responsible for taking care of younger children, you don't have that opportunity to do that. And so I think that as we wrap ourselves around a community of educators, we have to reach out and reach past where we are, reach past our comfort zone, our comfort level, and try to get all these children excited about education at an earlier age. And so all the programming that you have is wonderful. You have to get them there. You have to keep them engaged. You have to have a parent or someone in the community that can make sure that those children are funneled into the progressive way of how they need to move forward in their educational education opportunity. We sometimes look and say, you know, that one's not going to do, that one's not going to do, but the bottom line is that these are our children, and if they are not successful, that means that we're not successful. We have not done something to make sure that they're on the right track.
So love all of these programs goes without saying, but thinking about a particular program that I felt was successful, and not just because I worked there, but LifeWise, formerly Kingdom House, so I was there when it was still Kingdom House. When I was there as a teen counselor, we had a annex building for the teenagers that was about keeping them safe and also giving them a safe place to be at night, because we were in the Peabodys and there was just like a lot of stuff going on in the community. There was an educational component, right? Like we had tutors, we had field trips, we had all of these things that we did, but what we started first with was our relationships with them. We knew they were going to be with us all evening. They were going to have dinner with us. We wanted to know what was going on in their lives. We knew their families. We wanted to have community with them first before we asked them to take the next step to then do all of this additional work outside of school. Because it's one thing to say like, oh, well, you need this. Like if you're going to do anything with your life, you need to do this thing or have this extra support. But if we did not know them, if we didn't understand where they were coming from or what they were dealing with, or make things fun, you know, because they're still kids, then why would they trust us? Why would they connect with us? And so we really started from a place of trust. Like, I want you to know who I am. I want to know who you are. And yes, I'm going to ask you to go to this tutoring service because that F in English is not going to do. But afterwards, we can go play the we in the community space. You know, like we were able to ask things of them because we were willing to connect with them. Now, do all organizations get to do that? No, but there are places out there that are doing that work that are willing and interested and open to having these kids there, and they have the spaces and they aren't being used. And if you don't use the space, you lose the money, right? Those grants go away. So just like, again, that whole like collaborate with one another so that we make sure that we don't lose this funding, we don't lose these spots, and these kids continue to gain community. Because really, I'm a parent and I would love if my kids thought that I was the person that they can go to at all times, but I want them to have other trusted adults. I want them to have people they can talk to at school. I want them when they go to their clubs to have people that they can trust there, that they know will support them and look out for them even when I'm not around. And so really like fostering a love for those programs and making sure that they get the support they need, then I know that those kids will be all right, even if they don't go the path that I want them to. And a lot of those kids didn't. You know, they said that they had like certain dreams and they did other stuff, but in general, they were okay because they knew they could talk to us. They grew up, most of them are adults now who have their own kids, which makes me feel as ancient as the sun, but you know, they were all right and they knew that they had a safe place to go. And a lot of the statistics around them, that it didn't end up being their life. And just to be able to say like, yeah, no, they did what they wanted to do, how they wanted to do it, and I was just here to support them was important. And yeah, I kind of like lost the thread there. But basically like, I just want to be there for the kids, and we have to all want that for them, not just like, here is what your life needs to be, but what do you want and how can I help you kind of vibes. Does that make sense?
So again, this is one of these big questions. Could go a lot of directions with it, but two thoughts came to mind. And first, so I've got 4 boys of my own. So they've all went past high school for education. One's, let's say, getting his doctorate, and the other's all the way to one's going to graduate from Rankin here in the next month or so. So they're where they need to be, right? They're where they need to be. So it isn't a cookie cutter approach. You need to think of the individuals, Councilman Day said. So just thinking about that, it's not the same for everybody. And we need to maybe get away from, everybody needs to go to college. Everybody needs to learn something, be useful. How you do that could vary. And then the second thing, as far as tools, and I don't hear much, I don't have heard it said, but that St. Louis Community College is the greatest thing in St. Louis from my experience. It's accessible, affordable. You've got great instructors up there. I don't know if anybody knows Terry Freeman up there. You know Terry, right? Just salt of the earth. So I just want to put in a plug for the community college. I don't even work there or nothing, so I don't get nothing for it. But so as far as tools in there, everybody need to be run down to community college and taking advantage of it. It's a great resource. So, thank you. I think I talked about my own experience already. My parents hadn't been to college, so I think it's just lack of role models. So you got to know somebody that was an engineer if you want to be an engineer. But now STEM's a big field too, right? So there's a lot of words there. So STEM, I'm an engineer, so the E. But I'm kind of old school civil engineer, right? So work for the sewer district. You saw all on the news, the big holes in the ground open up last week. I went and stood next to all of them and got somebody working on them. So plumbers and drain layers, ditch diggers, equipment operators. So those sorts of role models. So again, in my case, I mentioned my parents hadn't been to school. But, you know, pastor mission, education begins at home. You know, I grew up in a house with encyclopedias, more Bibles than I could count, right? Lives of the Saints, Bibles in German. So I think, you know, you just got to be the role models for young people. We talk a lot about the young people. That doesn't mean you got to have the PhD. That means you need to turn off the screen and read a book. Go outside when it rains and see what happens to the water, right? Chase frogs around. The stuff that kids used to all do, right? So I think the biggest thing is just lack of role models and you know, just a lack of practical skills or an emphasis on practical skills, being able to do something useful. You know, changing the oil in our own car, nobody does that anymore, right? I was probably doing that when I was 10 years old for Dad. So do something practical and useful. Thank you.
Absolutely love going behind it. For a couple of reasons. First, we actually graduated from the same alma mater. So I'm also excited to have so much in common with you and to recognize that I'm also being able to hear a lot of experience
Testing, testing. Oh my gosh, okay, okay.
I couldn't, my headphones broke. So I was like, I'm just so happy to be on speaker. I got no one on speaker. I was like, I hate to be that person. But I was sitting because I actually went to Office Depot because the Office Depot that is closest to me was closed. And the only one that was open was the one that we had. And I was going there because our organization is also a community this morning, talking to about getting into STEM and how we can support them even better. Right? So we have engineers, and I was putting out some flyers that we were going to hand out to the students and for them to prepare them in STEM. She heard us talking and heard us with an engineer.
And she was talking about things that we go through as engineers and just how crazy the time and all that goes. And I said, I don't mean to be nosy, but I can relate to exactly. And then that's how it all started. And so I gave her my card yesterday. And I came up to
I don't believe in coincidence.
No.
Also, I believe that, I tell people I'm a constant student because you never know who you're going to learn from and who can teach you and what you can teach other people. But also, being one of those people where to my person interested in dating people makes a world of difference. Because I will talk to people. But I love that you can. You were like, I mean, she said it just like that. I was confused. But I'm an engineer too. And the excitement, because was your friend still on the phone?
and she hung the phone up to her friends. I'm waving. I'm Kim.
And this was like, when she told me, she was like, I'm Kim. I said, oh, I'm Kim. And there's not that many. Right? And I'm not sure she's in general.
I was the first black chemical engineer they hired in Mountain Clyde. Female.
Just the fact that there's so many people, not being some category of engineer, like my career, that is so encouraging. There were two of us.
But anyway, I just came up to speak to her. And I said, popped her right next to her. You all are doing an excellent job. You all doing an excellent job. I came up to say that. She kind of brought back a memory when I was in Mountain Clyde. We used to do a program with MSC. Mountain Clyde partnered with MSC. Oh, girl, thank you. I don't think so, Al. But thank you. Yeah. So MSC used to have a program called Partners in Protecting the Environment, and we would go around to schools as engineers to talk about water. They had a canned program and everything. So, yeah. Y'all got everything you need? You all okay? Okay. Yes.
It was, I didn't know it was wrong. I went to Mobab last night.
Okay.
About 11.
Okay. What did it end up being?
It was like 88, 108.
Girl, I told you.
But they won't just let you leave.
No, they won't. No. They got. And then you had to stay there. You had to stay there.
You gotta wait for this person.
I ain't got to wait for
The
it.
doctor. I didn't get them about 3:30.
They gonna get their money. When you go, you're gonna be at least 4 to 6 hours because they gotta get paid, and they gotta find something wrong with you so they can get paid. Understand?
They said, that's what Leonard said. Something like that. But I said, well, there's no urgent care open that late. I should, I had to go to the,
Gotcha.
and I called them one north. They said, oh, there are 25 people. I'm like, oh, no, I would have been there still.
You sure would have been.
Because it wasn't that urgent.
Gotcha. Well, I'm glad. I told you. I told you it was kind of. You probably would just. You're having seesawing.
And I think maybe I'm just a little overwhelmed.
And now you seesawing your eating patterns, and you kind of gotta get. You gotta get stable. So you may have to eat more times. Yeah, a few more times a day. Because I think you look like you just. You say you felt injured. You mean you say you felt better. I said it's kind of associated. Come on. I was taking pictures. Are you taking pictures? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'll take a picture of you guys whenever you're good.
I forgot your name. I'm so sorry.
Mr. Mayfield.
Mayfield, yes. Used to work with him when I worked at Head Start.
Just coming to see where we fit in.
So are we just doing Q&A now? Q&A?
Not always greener, you know.
I know. Right now, it may not be the best time to come back. We're going to go back to these ones.
I can only imagine what these things. So, we just gonna put up the good fight.
It's all in the stone.
Everything we're supposed to.
Okay. Tell Frank back.
But I think we're good until fiscal year. We already getting ready for the year. Hopefully we'll have.
Miss Hill strikes again. I said Miss Hill strikes again.
Yeah.
She always knows
I
she
want
wants
to connect with the parents, counselors, and the parents. So that
And how some pretty flowers up here.
She was just down at the center yesterday. Still doing the incredible years.
What? Candy is like fruity, all fruity. So nerds, Twizzlers, stuff like that.
Go on. I know it's more going. I think I'm gonna hear some more questions.
okay.
Then the next time we interact, I'll try to see where the wife fits in. Hopefully we still around.
Well, Stacy, I said hello. I will give her a call.
We'll do. I'm gonna talk to Pam when I get back.
Okay. All right.
Good to see you.
Pam there too. Pam still there?
Oh, Pam, yeah. She was out for surgery for a few months, but she just came back. And
What about Aaron? Aaron still there?
yeah.
Okay, I know Natalie now and Vanessa. No.
We had Suzanne. She left. Oh, she left.
I know Barbara did.
Barbara left. Sharon is still there.
Okay. I'm gonna get over there.
The core group is the core group. It's still there.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Thank you. All right, likewise.
Yeah, that's doing can. I'll get you guys eventually.
That's okay.
Before the end, I'll get.
just as I graduated, I found out they had a course in carpentry and plumbing taught over there. I forget the name of the street. No, it was I, no, it wasn't right. It was somebody in the city was teaching me, and I didn't know about it until I graduated. And the only way I found out about it, one of my friends told me about it. He was in the class. Well, I went back and got in. But this one was plumbing. But I found out that they had a course over at Hadley Tech teaching carpentry, and I went and joined that class. Got kicked out because I was with too many girls. I had my head on the wrong thing. But I'm a late bloomer to begin with. I was just telling Sister Porter Revelation in my church that all my life I was a late bloomer. I did everything late.
Ladies, excuse me one second. It's my honor to introduce you all to a friend. This is Mr. Frank Bell. He's the director of Elevate St. Louis. And here's Miss Pinkston. How are you? Very good to meet you. This is Mr. Harris. Good to meet you too. Thank you. And hopefully we'll be able to talk a little bit after.
I always see information across my email about elevating an event at Hair Stove.
That's a different organization.
Oh, it's
yes.
a different one.
Yeah, we have not done anything with
Okay,
Paris Store at this
okay.
particular point, though. So,
Okay.
yeah, but this
Okay.
is my card, and
Okay.
and on the back, if you scan those two codes on the back, one is you'll see a video about our organization, and another one will be a student testimonial too. So,
Okay.
thank you very much.
I don't know about Ronnie, but if you could reach me by her calling her. Do you have another card?
I do. I can get on with you. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, yeah. So, I'll get
Mr.
there real
Harris,
quick.
do you all start, or would you just do a mic check for us? Because a few people have.
Hello.
Okay, there you go. That one works.
Hello, hello.
We're primarily in North St. Louis County.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I would like to follow what you said for future.
No, Elevate St. Louis is part of a national model. We have 22 locations all around the country. I planted this one here 8 years ago.
Julio. Julio. Can you hear me?
I've been in
Julio.
places not my official capacity of leading our organization. Not in my official capacity of leading Elevate St. Louis, but I try to get out. Thank you much. Thank you.
Look at that.
Will do. Will do. Thank you much.
After. Oh, okay. So
When they use this mic, they speak a little bit more. It's not as loud as the other ones. Okay. He's okay, but he's intimidating. Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate that.
When you talk in this mic, I need you to speak up a little bit more if you can. Okay. It means you have to leave 11.
Yeah, I have to go out and get my, I have a Zoom call, and yeah.
So I will ask you the first question after the break, come back and break, and that way if you need to go ahead and go, when you come back when you can. Thank you.
We're going to get started in another minute. 1 minute.
Okay, all right.
Test. 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 Test, test.
Thirty seconds. Welcome back, everyone. Before we start, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge two retired teachers who are members of Northside SDA Church. Elder Kelly, if you stand and say hello to everybody. As well as Mother Akapor. Thank you. They are our most senior educators at the church, and we want to make sure that we acknowledge them. I did ask them to tell a story, but they told me no. So we're going to kick it off with our question and answer. And to that, Elder Kelly, I know that you have a question if you would like to share with us and get us started today.
First, I want to start, excuse me, with a little story. When I was a teenager, I guess I was about 17, a wino asked me to wash my car one day. And I said, well, why not? I was big shot. At least I thought I was. And he washed my car. A couple of times he did that over the months that I knew him. And one day he said something to me. And this is what he said. Life is a measure to be fulfilled and not a vessel to be drained. That was way above my pay grade. I didn't know what he was talking about. Several years later, I'm in the military, out guarding an airplane. And that statement came back to me. I said, wow, I hadn't thought about this in years. And I tried to figure out what it meant. But by the time I was out of the military, it came to me. And I had never measured up. My vessel was draining because I was wasting time. So I thought I'd go to college. And I'm cutting way through a lot of material. But that made me who I am today, that statement. Because I had found out what the measure of life was. And that vessel that had been draining was me. And I did something about it. And I'm telling you, I'm a hard man to beat. at anything because of that statement. When you measure up in life, that's a big accomplishment. I had never gone to college, and here I was 12 years from retirement. Went back, went to college. Wanted to do it right out of high school, but my mother talked me out of it because my oldest brother went up to Lincoln and got in trouble and beat up a couple professors, and she thought I'd do the same thing. Well, I have a question. That's just a little bit, I don't want to tell you the rest of that. But I have a question for Ms. Martin, young lady on the end. Is there a certain age or a certain grade that students should be channeled into courses that will prepare them to be engineers? Yes, ma'am.
I love that quote. I think that that is honestly a very adequate quote that represents engineering and the journey of honestly finding yourself as a critical problem solver. Because that's how I see engineering. Talk about at what point should you introduce. I think that frame that we have to have as a community about what introduction to STEM looks like. Um, one thing that I one thing that I recognize about introduction to STEM programs is that they tend to follow a lot of the same framework as a student would find in school, right? It is here is a problem. We're just going to associate it to some aspect of science. It has a finite answer. And we want to know that you know how to memorize this finite way of doing this to give us the answer we were expecting you to have. But engineering, science, math, technology requires for you to have an infinite amount of possible answers and be able to challenge yourself to figure out what avenue you're going to take and be able to critically support that with whatever metric you want to say it is. I said 1 + 1 is actually 24. My answer isn't wrong because I'm choosing to go off of cartons of a dozen eggs. But if I don't know how to articulate that, if I don't understand the way of thinking, if I'm trained that there's always a very specific answer to every problem that I'm given, and I'm not able to get the mentality of problem solving, innovative, creative solutions, then it doesn't matter that you introduce them to STEM, because when they get to engineering or when they get to science, math, and technology roles, they'll lack the critical understanding of what they're actually expected to do. So, to answer your question, we should start from the time that a child is born, understanding that they are critically taking in information at all times. We should see their development as opportunities for us to challenge what we think we understand about solving a problem and how a child sees a problem, and reframe what is right and wrong about how they're processing that information. We can start as early as birth with a lot of that. When we talk about formal education, we should start as early as possible. But it's not so much introducing them to math and science, because they're going to get that. Now, if that experience is positive, they'll probably continue in it. If it's negative, it doesn't matter how good they are if they don't have the village to support that. But we can start as early as their developmental brains, are. The challenge is, are we going to challenge ourselves to reframe the way we look at what problem solving looks like? Are we going to challenge ourselves to be able to see that engineering, math, science, and technology does have some area where you can be very formal in the way you teach it, but there's also a huge space where we confine our students to not being creative in that problem solving. That's where I feel like a lot of our challenge comes when we're talking about age, because as you get older, your ability to follow the rules is what you're focused on. We lose most students in middle school, most of them. Most kids who love math and science in elementary school don't go into it by the time they're in middle school. Not because they can't, not because their ability has changed, but purely because by the time they get to middle school, we've already taught them whether or not they know how to follow the rules well. And math STEM is about being able to be not only solve the problem with the information and tools that you're given, but you have to be able to be critical and creative. And we tend to teach that out of people in the formal education process. So we should introduce the concept of problem solving early. We should encourage students to be innovative in their problem solving and also challenge ourselves to be creative in our problem solving when we're with children. We should allow them to see us in our creative problem solving, whether that's us just trying to get some food for the week, which was how I saw it. My mom's experience was every bit of problem solving for me. I watched someone take very little food, use skills she already had to make meals for weeks. That is creative problem solving. Connecting those types of things to kids are what'll get them to be not only prepared for STEM, but prepared to be great contributors in whatever profession they go into. Because we're no longer limiting them to just always having a correct answer or thinking a very specific way. Start early, start as often as possible, and challenge yourself to be creative in order for them to be creative.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Thank you. Definitely opens up the world of possibilities. The balance of creativity and science. Mother Akapori.
I'm going to try to keep my story short.
Okay.
But they say everyone has a story. And so I grew up in Pruitt-Igoe projects. I know a lot of people here don't even know what that is. But I just felt like we lived on the 11th floor and there were just so many people. And I didn't see, I graduated from Vashon High School in '64. But before that happened, I dropped out of school. And I know that hurt my mother and father so much because they didn't graduate from high school. They coming from the South, Mississippi and Arkansas. And so they came here to St. Louis. I was born in Detroit. I wasn't born in St. Louis. I was the only one that was born not in St. Louis. I was born in Detroit. And they traveled here, but when my father came here, he had tuberculosis, which means that he could no longer work. Because in those days, they didn't know how to treat tuberculosis. All they knew was how to do surgery on it. But it hurt him so bad because I dropped out of high school. And my mother told my dad, she said, Archie, you have to go put her back in school. He was walking. We didn't have transportation either. We walked. We got to the school. He said, I know you're not going to stay in school, but your mama wants you to go back. But what made him so proud is when we walked in the building and he started talking to the principal, the principal said, why did she leave? We didn't put her out of school, and her grades are too good for her to be out. And so I got back in school, and I just started from there. I just went from there. I just graduated, and then I went to the community college, Forest Park. I was able to go there without paying tuition, because at that time they had different grants and things, the Pell Grant. I also worked in what they call a drop-off center. In other words, teachers could bring their children, because I was going into early child care. That's what I started out at. Girls that had children, they could bring their children there. So they hired not only myself, between classes, I had so many hours of classes, and I had so many hours to work. But I was paid through the government. The school didn't pay my salary. And so from there, I just went on to Harris Stowe University. I was there. I was there, graduated, got my degree. And then I got the Danforth grant, and then that allowed me to, they paid for my master's. And so I've been in the teaching field it seemed like all my life. But I enjoyed education because I always had to feel that I wanted to make my parents proud because they didn't go to high school and get a degree. And so that's what drives me. And I guess because of that, it drove my children, all my children, except for the oldest son. I had a problem with him. He had to go through Slate to get his GED because we kept putting him back in school and he never would stay. We take him to school, he'd go in one door. By the time we turned around, he had walked out another door. But I was glad that he actually got his GED through another organization. And then he wanted to take architecture drafting. In those days, there was no opportunity for him to do that. So he took manual labor after that, but he always worked. But to make a long story short, I treasure my education. And I guess I instilled that in all my children because my daughter, the oldest one, she was a registered nurse. I have the other works in the hospital in management. Then I have a son he's in the military. I don't know where he is now because he told me that they was deploying him the end of March. But I like I said, it's something in me that instilled my children that they had to do better. It seemed like sometimes they were trying to outdo me. But I enjoyed education so much I don't know, that's in my blood, I guess, in my DNA. And I instill that in my children. So education is still on my heart.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That speaks to, yeah, please, that's a wonderful story. And that speaks to something that kind of sounds like these two things don't go together, but there is joy in education. Again, it's transformative, and it can uplift, it can close gaps, and to Councilwoman Days' point, it can catapult you to a different level. And that's what that story, you talked about parents being involved, a child being determined and not giving up, and the school system and a teacher engaging and embracing the students. So thank you for that. Do we have any other questions?
My name is Frank Bell. I lead Elevate St. Louis. And I want to thank you both for sharing your stories because they kind of context for what I want to ask as well. So, very much so thank you. We can all applaud. Yeah, so in what I heard today, I'm very encouraged by everyone's focus on wanting to make sure that we set the right community environments and structures in place so that every young person can receive a high. But also in my time of working in higher education for 15 years and then also working in Iowa and also here in Missouri, I'm a St. Louis native. By the way, the NGA project took out my childhood home that my mom and dad built. Matter of fact, the northeast pillar of the parking lot sits right where my mom and dad's house used to sit. St. Louis kid, raised in St. Louis. Okay, is this better? Thank you. This is better? All right. Okay, now I don't have to talk so loud. All right. And so, as I've been sitting here listening and looking at my professional experience, research interests, and other things, I don't think that I heard enough about the parents' role in helping kids come to the table. Now, Councilwoman Days Heard, is that right? Yes, ma'am. She touched on it. Her days, pardon me. She touched on it when we talked about trying to help parents get their children to the library where there's programs and things, right? But in my experience, what I've seen is that, and in my own lived experience too, what I've seen is that when parents understand how important education is and they see themselves as partners with their school district, whether it be public or private, the child tends to do better. Even in single-parent homes with no fathers present, we see that, the data shows that those kids don't fare as well. But when that parent, father or mother, has a good working relationship with the school and they're seen as co-equal partners, then the children tend to do better. So, my question then is, what are the things that we need to do outside of schools and school districts to be able to help parents, particularly younger parents, be comfortable with and even embrace the identity that I am a mother and I am a father and I'm not a social media influencer, or I'm not trying to get back a youth that I'll never capture again because I'm trying to do other things, but to really embrace motherhood and fatherhood and what that means for children. And the last thing I'll say about this, and my question is, how do we have community-based supports for this? Because in my experience, school districts can't be everything to our children. Teachers are being asked to be big mama, uncles, aunties, counselors, even if they can get away with it and not be in violation of their contracts, be an Uber service for them too as well, when all they wanted to do when they got in the game was just teach. So how do we then leverage a community collaboration where we can help parents rediscover the awesome blessing it is to be a parent and be engaged in their children's education?
I would like to start just by sharing some information with you. It's correct that, there's not a lot of information out there to help parents. There's a lot of information out there around students, first-generation students, college students, low-income students out there. And in 2022, two of our staff members did a research paper because they found out there's a lot of information about students, but no one ever asked the parents about their knowledge, their understanding, or how they can support their child. So Kevin Todd, our Upper Bound Director, and Rahman Jabbar, our Education Advisor, wrote a paper, and it was published in the Pell Institute in 2022. And it basically was called The Unheard, What College Readiness Means to Trio Parents. And in particular, they researched trio parents who had students who were first-generation college students, low-income students. And from that, and I don't know all the detail, which Kevin was to kind of share that with that question, but it talked about, again, the expectations. What does it mean for a parent when their child is off to college? How can they support that student? And out of this research, we have begun to incorporate some of the tools that we can use to help support students in our programs. We do a lot, not just with our 6th to 12th grade students, but with our parents as well. So I just kind of want to just mention that I'm in agreement that there's not a lot of knowledge out there for parents, but I can say that we have begun having that conversation in our institution and beginning to develop programs around that area. I don't know whether Ms. Harris want to add anything that I might have missed.
Well, I just wanted to give an example of something we involved our parents in. It was called the psychological effects of music. And, we wanted the students to come and the parents to come and understand how music is a mood thing. It can, if you're already angry and then you're listening to some music that says, go and shoot the house up. I don't know. But it was really great, and parents came, students came, some of our colleagues came. We had a meal, and so different things. You have to make it engaging. something that they're interested in. This is one thing I want to say, though. How do we make all of the academics as important to show up for parents as the sports? That's my thing. Sports, everyone, and that's great. But how do we get the fathers in the school on report card day? If they can be out, for the football game, how can we get them in the building for report card day? Now, you may be able to get them in the building if they say your son can't play because he's getting an F, he's going to show up then. But there's something about that, like the parent release based on the age. Elementary, more involvement. Middle, less. High school, I'm telling you, high school parent conferences, it's nothing like it used to be. There's no one coming. So maybe that has something to do with the fact that you can get it online. But I just wanted to share, involving parents. We have a database. We use what we call a Lumen Blast. We send text messages. We send emails. We invite parents. We try to make it something that of interest to them. So that's one thing that we do.
Can I just follow up with a couple of things real quick? To that point, my organization has an MOU agreement with the Ferguson Florissant School District, so we're actually embedded in the school district, and we teach character development and life skills classes to students as an elective option. So we're in there, and so what I'm about to say next, I can say with great certainty. One of the biggest challenges that we find about our public schools, particularly when we talk about having fathers be more involved, and I say this as a man, married to my wife for 33 years, raising our child and never missed one parent-teacher conference, is that schools can be no man's land, meaning that men are not respected when they walk in the building. And so there's been times where I would ask a question and that teacher, male or female, would turn to my wife and answer her. And then my wife says, no, my husband answered the question. And so I think that there has to be a cultural shift in that, because when we want to make more fathers be more welcome, we have to make sure that we are ready to go. So when they come into the room, embrace them, hand their brother a donut, do whatever, and say, hey, I'm really happy that you're here, because there's a lot of push-pull forces that will cause him not to come into the school building for whatever reasons. But I thoroughly agree with you there with that piece. The one thing that I wanted to share is that one of the things I have seen with what you all do in your respective programs, with the church, also with what happens in community colleges, that at the core of this, and also too, I was an advisor for the National Society of Black Engineers at Iowa State University, so we got something in common there, okay? But what I've seen though is that the core of anything to get a person to consider doing something that they hadn't done before is relationships. Okay, is that if we have a high quality relationship and we value the humanity of the person in front of us and not be recognizing socioeconomic status, gender, or anything else, and we just make a solid connection, over time, they're more likely to attempt to do things. And then if there is success in that, there is a village that has helped to create that mindset, and then they shift and move forward. And I'll just finish with a little short story about my mom, who's right here, deaconess here at this church. My mom and my dad had a rocky relationship early on until my father gave his life to Christ. And after they became the father and husband we always knew he could be. But they both also got GEDs, and my father left to go join the military, and when he was 16, lied to get in, and he did 2 tours in Korea. And my mother ended up having to leave school for early pregnancy, because at that time in the 60s, you didn't go to school, around folks, you were sent off somewhere else. But here these 2 GED individuals, sat down and held me accountable for my homework. And so by the time I was at Metro High School, and I'm doing calculus homework, and I'm sitting there crying because I can't get it done, my mom, who come home as she's cooking, she says, well, tell me about the problem. I tell her about the problem. And she says, now tell me about the steps in the problem. I would tell her about the steps in the problem. I'm still crying on my homework, and I got wet paper and everything. And then she says, okay, as you go through those steps, where do you have trouble with it? Okay, write that down. All right. And then over time, I thought my mom knew calculus because my grades got better, and I knew what to do when I got back home. When I got back to school, I knew what questions to ask, right? So I'm in college, and now I'm talking to my mom about chemistry. And she said, boy, I don't know nothing about no chemistry. And I said, but you knew about calculus. She said, I didn't know about calculus. I said, I thought you did. What my mom did was that she held me accountable. And I knew when I came home, I had to have my homework done because she was going to ask about it, right? Accountability, even if you're a first generation college student, your parents hadn't gone to college, but your parents have been successful in holding a job. In my family, they said, be early because on time is late. We must be early because on time is late. When I was early to go to class, I found that I could get help because nobody else was there. Okay? Show up, communicate well, stay reading. Mom, why we stay reading? Just always stay reading. Keep a book in your hand, right? And we recognize in STEM education is that math is great, but if you can't comprehend what you're reading, you can't do math and science. Science and math, math and reading gets you to science, right? Okay. So what I'm offering is that there are things that our parents in the most challenging of circumstances, whether they're single, impoverished, or if they feel embarrassed about their own education attainment, they actually have fantastic tools that if we can build relationships with them to help surface this in them, that they will be very proud of what they can do to support their children and to become better partners in the relationship with their folks at school districts. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you for those great questions and that story. Thank you. It's a testament to, again, how education transcends the school building. It's at the kitchen table. It's in life in general. What's the problem? Now, what are the steps? You can take that anywhere you go. Thank you, Sister Bell. All right, do we have any other questions? Marlene, I think you have a few. And then you have one? No, come on, come on.
It's a short statement and a question. I am what is called an ERC manager with YWCA Head Starts. That means I'm over the eligibility, recruitment, the selection, the enrollment, and actually keeping the attendance of our students. And just to answer the gentleman's question, ever since I've been with the YWCA, we have always made an emphasis on engaging the parents. We make a special emphasis on engaging fathers, letting them know how important they are in the children's education. I'm actually a product of that because I used to just come and drop my kids off and, or come pick them up and never really engage. And it just took one teacher to ask me, did I want to read to the kids? And that was something so far out of, what I had going on in my mind, what being a dad is, what being a man is. But once I started reading in the class and volunteering, it just gave me a whole different outlook. And, at this time, I'm in my mid-30s. And so I started working with the Y actually in the kitchen, but they had opportunities and resources for me. I ended up going to culinary school. I ended up going to Central Methodist to get my psychology degree so that I could start working with the parents. And so I know how important it is to if you want the kids, you have to get the parents. And so we've always been engaging with that. And while I was at Central Methodist, I kind of learned myself that I kind of love learning. I had no idea what kind of student I would be. I didn't go to college right after high school. I wanted to travel, so I went to the military. But I wrote a paper, and it was called Learning to Love Learning. And so I think that once we reach the parents and we try to let them know that it's their responsibility. If you teach your child to learn to love learning, that they will be more engaged, you would be more engaged, and I think everything that everybody's doing will work better. So that's all I had to say. So I'm just, I guess my question is, how do we go about getting the parents first to love learning? That way we can reach the children and teach them to love learning. it's not an easy question.
I don't know. I don't think we as a society know, right? How do we get parents to encourage their kids to go in the right direction, and how many kids don't even have parents that are encouraging? And how sad is that? And I guess that's one of the culture wars, right, enter into with the DEI right now. So one of the things we do at the district, sewer district, we have a lot of, for minority and women-owned contractors and businesses to have certain opportunities to bid on work and win that work. I mean, they still have to win the work. They still have to do it. They still have to be low bid. This is one of the programs I run, is a small contract program. And a lot of immigrants, a lot of the Bosnians that came over here during the 90s are in those programs. So you know, how do you get people that are underrepresented in these different professions into them? You know, I really don't know. I do know that, I don't know. I will say I do know that if I go on a lot of construction sites, a lot of them guys working on construction sites aren't young anymore. Some of them look, it's like watching Catholic nuns sometimes, right? They're all up there. And if we're going to have a worthwhile workforce in 20, 30 years, it's not all going to look like me, right? That's just not the world anymore. So I don't know, other than, I guess I feel the frustration, and I wish I had an answer. But I think it's a great question for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge that the two questions are interrelated. And I think that they are complex questions that go beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic. They go to the moral foundations of who we are as people and as a society. I think that going back to the first question or the previous question about people being willing to be parents, I think that it's related to your question in that one of the challenges is that there may be a systemic issue of people who are children having children. And so people have not had the opportunity to truly live out their childhood. And so they're still trying to do kid things when it's time to be an adult. And I think that goes to what standards and values are we teaching? To me, it goes to how the church may be failing or is failing society. Because I think those are the issues and the principles that faith teaches that is really falling to the ground in our society. And if those areas are able to be corrected, then a lot of other things would fall in place. That's how I look at it. The last thing I'll say to it is perhaps one of the things that we need to do is to try to stop telling people that seeing is believing. Based upon where people grow up, they may never see it. Based upon their environment, they may never see it. But what we have to do is teach people to dream about things that they've never seen, to have faith and to have creative imagination to believe that what has not been seen, what has not been heard, what has not been experienced can indeed be a reality. And that is how, to me, transformation happens. There was a day when computers weren't in every home, but Steve Jobs envisioned a day when it would happen, and look at what we have today. We have to give that creative imagination back to our kids and to our community. We have to pour that into them and to help them see that their dreams can become a reality, especially with divine help on their side.
Do you mind? Excuse me.
I don't have a question per se, but I do have a comment. And I was sitting there thinking, one of the things I think is dangerous is to assume that parents don't love to learn. When I was married, I worked through college and grad school, so I had to love some form of learning. But to think that to make a statement that says, all parents don't love, or to assume that they don't love to learn, is very dangerous. And it's very dangerous because we don't know what a parent has to go through on a daily basis before they can even make it to a PTO meeting. To assume that parents don't want to be involved is dangerous, because there are some parents who are working 2 and 3 jobs to afford their children's education or to afford just the basic necessities. And so we need to think about the other variables that are out there that parents are facing, because there are parents, 2-parent households, and both parents are working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Does that mean that they don't want to be involved in the PTO sessions? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that they have other obligations. So because I can't make it and because you don't see me, don't assume that I'm not active in my child's education. I may not be there, but I'm there with my child as they're learning. I'm doing my very best to teach them Common Core math, which is evil. So let's try to stop pointing the finger of blame, by saying, why aren't, because there's reasons. We just haven't tapped into it yet. Number one, even the black woman is the most educated person on the face of the earth. So we can't assume that they don't like learning. So before we start pointing the finger and trying to figure out exactly what it is, we know that there's multiple things that's wrong, and we know that there are multiple things, and it could even be systemic and maybe even faith-based. Because sometimes, I do challenge, theological ideology sometimes, that it's not even the church's job to raise a community. It's not. The church is there to help and kind of be the backbone and the structure of some things. But even if I don't know Jesus loves me, this I know, I do know that I got to get an education that 2 + 2 = 4. So let's not point the finger all the time, but do some more searching and some more digging and say, well, then how can we be more engaging? Because, like you said, some places, like, it's a no man's land. When you walk into a school, you don't see a whole lot of men because it's not welcoming. And then the fact that some parents look at the school as a place that is intimidating to them because they don't have a formal education. I worked in education, and some parents did not want to come into the school because they didn't feel smart enough to even come into an elementary school. So there are multiple reasons. I just wanted to point that out, that just because you don't see them don't mean that they're not active.
I appreciate that. I'm sorry. I appreciate that you brought that, because that was actually going to be my point. And had I known, I'd also get a good sermon. I would have came prepared to take far more notes, because I'm definitely a note taker, because I believe in learning from people, being a constant student. I got that from my mother, who, for the record, graduated from high school, could not pursue a college education because that was not afforded for her in the situation that she was in, right? However, my mom was still finding ways to pursue her passions. My mom was a very creative person. She was a very talented cook. I mentioned earlier that she could take very limited resources and make meals for a week, right? She also was an upholsterer, a very skilled one. For those who are familiar with the Edward Jones Dome, she was a part of the team that got to do the renovations for that because she was talented and that was her way of supplying that. She couldn't have predicted that she would have 4 kids and her partner would pass away. She couldn't have predicted that, right? She also couldn't predict that the situation that would leave her in after getting in a really bad car accident would make her lose both of the things that she was passionate about. That also happened to be her income. So not only is she left with the circumstances of her own life, she's now raising 4 new ones. We have no concept of the things she actually deals with on a daily basis, but we feel them. I think that when we talk about community, and I've been very careful to only say community and village in a lot of what I'm saying, because there are things my mom could not provide to me. But she was always open to building community that filled those gaps. I would never get another father, but there were men in my church, men in my organization, even men in the school, men in my community, a community for those, I said proudly I'm from North City, I grew up in Walnut Park. Men in my own community who nobody would look to as mentors actually sat in the protection of me and my family, right? So when we talk about what is it that we can do to empower parents, to support them, sometimes it's looking at what is it that we currently do. When I sit and I think about my experience, I recognize that I am an accumulation of not only the education that I've gotten, but the village and community that supported me getting there, whether they had what I have now or not. I think it's important for us to be careful about assuming that people have the information that we have. One of the challenges of being a millennial is that we're in the space of technology being both completely irrelevant for a good portion of our childhood and also being the one who got issued and ushered into technology being our world. And that is a scary place to live because now we are the ones working with a generation that doesn't even understand what life was like before technology. We are also dealing with the challenge of having to figure out how do we get kids to stop being on TikTok and create the next TikTok, right? How do we connect those concepts for them? But part of it is us challenging ourselves about how we show up. Do we show up with a preconceived idea about these people and their situation? Do we have resources and tools that we could be providing? My organization is we talk about STEM, obviously, but you can't increase the number of STEM professionals if we believe that the only talent comes from people who are 4.0 students, because not every engineer was a 4.0 student. So where do we service? We create programming that solves the deficit. We need you to learn about goal setting and decision making. We want you to see from the people who have made bad decisions and it worked out for them, because we have people who support them. We have to be the ones that step in. My engineering experience is because people stepped in for me. I couldn't always afford the books, I couldn't afford the clothes, I couldn't afford the conferences, I couldn't afford all of these different things. And sometimes I was even too afraid to even tell my mom of opportunities because of that. We have to recognize that when we talk about the deficit, we can be a part of creating that deficit.
Thank you.
So when we talk about how do we encourage students, how do we encourage parents, we have to start with self first and make sure we're not the ones projecting a concern, a problem, or a solution to something we don't understand.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd just like to address what the gentleman said. At Garfield School, what we did, the teachers got together and they decided that they would take one day out of the month for the parents to come in and we would teach math to them. so they would know how to explain how to work problems with their children. They come in one day out of the month to do science projects. So, but like the gentleman said, it didn't hold up because the parents have responsibility outside of the home. And that's the reason why the program didn't last long. But teachers also have to be willing to submit themselves to help the parents. We had what was called spelling dictation. We didn't want this kid to learn how to spell a bunch of words. Can you write it in a sentence? Grammatically, would it be correct when you finished it? And I've had parents come up and complain, well, we didn't have to do that in school. Well, you're not in school, your child is. We're here to help them to grow. And even with math, I've been calling the principal officers, well, I don't know why my son brought these problems home like this. I can't help him with them. Well, that's why we set up those particular programs, that they had 1 month, 1 day out of each month to do math with the parents, to do science with the parents. Things do work when you come together, when you really want to be instrumental in helping the home body. And that's just what I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have 1 or 2 more questions. Okay, and then we will wrap for the day. It's so much power-packed information. I'd like to encourage you to pass out your cards, your names, your emails, talk to the panelists after we're done. Look beside you and see who could have been sitting next to you and bring them to the next one. Because again, this is so important. It's about the village. It's about the community. We as parents, we as teachers, in our own professions, we all have an impact on education and how we impact the next generation. So I'd like to encourage you to do that as we wrap for for our last question.
Just really briefly, statement. I'm Latina, and I appreciate the panel, you guys being up there and just giving us information, everyone being here. I'm with Williams and Associates, so I'm new to the non-for-profit organization, trying to figure out bridging the gap of training centers and getting, like everyone's been saying, like families involved. One point I would like to say that Mrs. Martin, made, and to everyone, was great comments, but the one you made about coming from the environment of parents being great decision makers in the sense of just creative, like coming up with the meal preps and trying to take one meal and stretch it. And when you made the statement about STEM, making it relevant, make it STEM relevant, like how can I understand science, math, when I'm trying to, how does that relate to that? So having people exactly where you are that can relate to the places that you currently are in, how do I apply that to STEM? Because someone like me, I have a MSN, BSN, working on my MBA because I was so comfortable in the healthcare environment, and that's needed too. But at the end of the day, the children, getting our children and putting that information into them, but the parents do feel like there's a disconnect because when they hear the word STEM, so being able to, I don't know, advocate that word, because it can be intimidating, and somehow get to those parents. Oh, I know you're in construction or you work as housekeeping. You're still relevant. How does science apply to that in this area? Make sure children know that their homes, although your mother is not, they may not have a degree in this, or your father may not have a degree in that, single homes and things of that such. It might not even be the mother and father that are in the homes. It's the grandparents. So with that even being said, making it relevant, applicable, just small things that we can actually encourage our parents and fathers, because it was a statement made about even addressing the mother as, or the black woman as educated. And because of the certain things that we know and can perceive, then your brother, and then other people that come in and want to get noticed as a black man, we automatically turn because who's the talker? The woman. So we don't down the other person, help encourage them where they are, meet them where they are. And so when we say the church state has been separated, we bring it back because if you care enough about God, you care enough about yourself, care about yourself. And when you have that, you can inspire, you can encourage. That's the fundamentals of a great leader. It's not, anyone can be a leader, but being a great leader. But I wanted to say also, just coming from a background of poverty, I went to Sumner High School. I said all those accolades because I had a baby at 14 years old. And when you talk to me, no one would ever perceive that because we need to start checking our bikes at the door. And I remember the faces of people at 14 years old, still inspired, still wanted, but there was no one there to protect me. So that's how that happened. But we automatically judge people, even our own people judge our own people because this is all they see. They don't know that there are people like you, people that look like me that came from my community. So what we got to do is equip people like me, honestly, because I'm educated, but really not. I need to step by step on how can I get into the community with my MBA and try to get a non-for-profit, try to connect with other people that I'm not trying to make a name for myself. We gotta start at home. And I'm finished because I'll go. But I really do appreciate and didn't know that these opportunities existed for people to come in. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to have that. Come in with your input. And there's some things that you might not know until people end up talking and expressing things that they went through and having those other variables and things of that sort that's going on in our lives. But because we got this going on, we can't address it. The hardest part of my life wasn't college. It was high school because I had to fight the community, guns and that sort to get there. I was determined. But what about those people that have lost hope? You losing hope. And when you said the church, somehow it's like the church, and I say it's us, being able to say, not afraid, but be wise. Be wise in what you do.
Thank you.
It'll work out, but I appreciate being here. I'm excited, but yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you so much. Wow. All I can say is wow. Thank you for sharing.
I'm going to bring this down a bit. Thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity to bring the community together. My name is Katie Chambers. I've been an educator. I am an educator in the community for almost 20 years. Started as a teacher, assistant principal, principal. I currently am with Special School District of St. Louis County in HR and Human Resources. And what I'm bringing to the table here is from the perspective of the school and resonating as a former principal teacher of how often as a school system we work in silos, and we work as a siloed school system to say we expect the community to come to us, and we can't do that anymore. We can't do that anymore because of the fear, because of the not feeling a sense of belonging, because of the lack of confidence, or because of the lack of invitation sometimes to be a part. And so I come with what I'm inspired by, and what brings me so much joy to have spent my morning here is that we are being encouraged to be creative and start thinking differently about how school impacts our children. School can no longer stop at the door of our buildings. If we are not tapping into having recruitment fairs in the gym right across the hall here, if we're not tapping into engaging tutoring in our community centers right next to the basketball courts, if we don't get the schools out of the school doors, we're not going to move. And schools have to stop doing it on our own. This is amazing. This is a whole community coming together, and my colleague and I, Dr. Diggs, are looking around wondering where are our school partners, because they need to be in the room too, doing this together. We need to be working together because we don't have the opportunity to lose the youth. We have every opportunity here to re-engage and to think differently about how we do that. And so I just thank you. Thanks for opening the conversation. I'm so excited to hear that it's an ongoing conversation, because I think beyond words comes action, and until we start doing something different, we'll continue to talk for years about the same thing. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a rich and thoughtful conversation. And again, it's so rich that we can continue, and we will. Let's invite someone else. Let's invite another voice. Let's invite another person. Let's invite a child, a student, so that they can hear that there are people who are concerned. And maybe there's something that they can impart. We want to make sure that we continue this discussion, that it grows, because each of us has a stake in our future, and that's in education. I'd like to thank our hosts, Northside SDA Church and Pastor Barnes. Thank you to our panelists for sharing your experiences. We really appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness today. Thank you so much. To our moderators, thank you for guiding the conversation. And thank you to everyone in this room. Your willingness to show up and engage in these issues is exactly what is needed in our community. I am going to turn it over to close to Pastor Barnes. After Pastor closes, we have lunch available for you, but I would ask again to share your cards, your information, so that we can keep this conversation going beyond these walls.
Yeah, I think first of all, again, I want to thank everyone for coming. And I think it's important that we thank our hosts. Let's thank Angela. First of all, Angela Wade, amen. Marlena, who's here, we would just want to thank her for leading in the panel discussion. Can we just give her some love? And I just also want to thank, she had to step away, but Missy also. But in her absence, let's just still give her some love, amen. Let's bless the food. God, we just want to thank you so much for this discussion we've had today. Bless the food and the hands that have prepared it. In your name we pray. Amen.
Excuse me, before everybody steps away, I just want to make a quick announcement, a quick plug. Next month on May 31st, in the gym across from the sanctuary, the Northside Community Partners is collaborating with the Higher Education Consortium to host a community resource college and career fair. It's going to be on Saturday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. The community is invited. And the purpose of that event is to bring together education, career opportunities, and also the resources that people need to be able to be successful in their education and in their career. So we want to invite you to that. It's a holistic approach to being able to pursue whichever pathway is going to best suit you or your family. So we just encourage everybody to come out, and we do have flyers. We'll have flyers on the HEC table if you're interested, but it's going to be on May 31st from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., and it's a community resource college and career fair. Thank you.
Real quick, I need to say this also. May 4th through the 9th, there are about 3,000 doctors who are coming into the St. Louis area from across the country to provide completely free healthcare services to those who are in St. Louis. It's going to be at the Dome, and we're talking about everything from vision to dental, minor surgeries. All of that is going to be completely free. And if you want more information on that, just see me afterwards. We're in need of about 300 more volunteers to make this happen, and it's completely free. We want you to help us get the word out about it.